Hey guys, Lorrena and Magana here with NewFilmmakers Los Angeles. Today, I'm coming to you live from the world-famous Sunset Gower Studios. Thanks to Movie Maker magazine, I'm going to be presenting you with some of the most talented, up-and-coming filmmakers hitting the 2012 Film Festival circuit. So come on, what are you waiting for? Let's check them out.
Well, there are a lot of awkward moments I want to get to tonight. Well,
Finding Grace is a film about a young woman's dilemma on a blind date.
How did you come up with the concept?
The film is written by a young lady named Grace Savage, who's actually also the producer, and she stars in the film as well. So I think it's a true story.
What were some of the difficulties?
Difficulties. I mean, the only difficulty for me was time. You always just want more time. If you can get it, more time to just have fun, massage the material, and try to do new things.
There's 3 films. The first one is The Winter Stalker, and it's so short, and there's a twist, so I can't even talk about what it is, but the way we'd market it is, when is the one time it's actually okay for a creepy old man to stalk a pretty girl? So that's that. You're laughing. The other one is The Life Cycle of a Good Idea, which is I tried to take the entire creative process and condense it into one crazy 60-second visual metaphor. And then the third one is a music video for the band Dredge.
Were there any difficulties while making these films?
Difficulty, well, in The Winter Stalker, we used high-speed photography, and we couldn't afford an actual high-speed camera, so we rented a crash test dummy camera, which is actually really hard to light, and it's kind of ugly, so we had to go in and clean up pixels and whatnot. And that's very tough because in order to light high-speed photography, 1,000 frames per second, you need such an abundance of light that we'd actually get sunburn from standing in front of the light. Because if there's something like you're splashing a glass of milk and you need to see all the globs and stuff, if you want a sharp image, we're literally pumping every light we could possibly muster.
Did you end up writing scripts or just a basic outline for all 3 of your shorts?
They all have 30-page breakdowns. I mean, I'm talking charts and graphs and emotional spikes and where there needs to be movement and dynamic range, music people would call it. So definitely, and I do write everything myself. I storyboard it all myself. So there's a ton of that.
Seven centimeters dilated. Heartbeat's normal.
Is it okay? Is she okay?
Yes, everything's fine. No distress. So you opted out of termination?
Wasn't an option for us.
Why would you do this?
We're having a baby. Are you going to help us or not?
831 is a film about the last day of sunlight on the planet, and it follows a young couple who are having a baby as the world is falling apart.
How did you come up with the concept for your film?
I came up with the concept a little over a year ago. There was this big solar storm, and there were a lot of solar flares disrupting communications, and I thought, how interesting would it be if the sun was going out? And it always fascinated me as a kid that once the sun goes out, there will be 8.31 minutes of light, because it takes 8.31 minutes for the light from the sun to hit us. So the sun could go out and we wouldn't know for 8.5 minutes. And it kind of built from there. I wanted to create a large, epic world, but tell a story that was contained.
How many different locations did you end up shooting at?
We shot mostly in East LA, and some sound stages in downtown LA. But the scenes where the streets were a wreck was all East LA, and we didn't even have to production design the streets that much. They were in horrible shape.
Was it easy for you to direct your wife?
I didn't really have any difficulties directing my wife. She was very convincingly in labor pains, which kind of hurt and gives you that little but I got through it.
Melody is seriously disturbed. You should steer clear. Her last little boyfriend was stabbed in the eye with a pencil. Got it?
My film is called I Love You Like Crazy. It's a love story. It's a very dark but sweet comedy. It takes place in a psychiatric hospital. It's basically about a guy who's totally delusional and schizophrenic, and he thinks he's a rock star. He meets this wild, interesting, bipolar chick in the hospital, and they have a very sweet love relationship romance that changes both of them.
How were you able to capture such amazing performances from your actors?
Number one, I think it's with good casting. I will not settle, and especially because my material is comedy, but it's dark, so and it's emotionally driven, and so a lot of people will come in and read on the page and they just get the dark, sad part, but it's not funny, and it has to be funny.
What inspires you?
Real life tragedy inspires me to do comedy. Like, I'm not interested in making sad movies. I feel like there's too much pain in the world anyway, but when you go to a movie and really laugh, like gut belly laugh, you know, until it hurts, like, that's amazing, and it's so rare, and I love that.
I'd really like to help Nikki.
$5,000? Look, if I thought there was anything else I could do, I would do it. Please. Please.
Queen is a short film, it's a drama, about a drag queen cabaret star named Nikki Holiday, whose plans to start a family fall apart, and she tries to fill the void in her life.
Given your relationship with Ryan, was it easier to direct such a vulnerable performance?
Oh yeah, big time. It always helps when you have a rapport or some sort of shorthand with the actor or director that you're working with. So a lot of the time, you know, I don't really have to fully explain things to him. He kind of knows what I'm going for already. Not to mention that all the time that we spent hanging out before we actually shot the movie, we got to talk about it and, you know, really be on the same page about everything.
How did you come up with the concept?
I took a lot from like Chicago and these musical movies and kind of the look and feel and the colors and those types of things. I really wanted to incorporate the cabaret feeling into the whole thing, so I stole a lot from Chicago.
Join me, father and lover, to save humanity from Armageddon.
Fortune Cookie Magic Tricks.
It's a gay zombie martial arts musical mashup. Essentially, it's about a father who struggles to come to terms with discovering that his son is gay and resorts to a bunch of increasingly absurd things to cure him of homosexuality.
Now, did all of your actors have a kung fu background?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the casting process, and the main zombie is a stunt coordinator by day. So he really, I mean, all the martial arts sequences in that film, really, I mean, he was essentially the biggest part of that whole thing, really helping me out.
Any difficulties while making your film?
It was absolutely, you know, the funnest time, I think, especially that martial arts sequence. We deliberately set aside one day to shoot that whole martial arts sequence, so everybody was kind of gearing up for that, and you can sense the morning of the shoot, like all the people on set, I mean, in the entire cast, they're all guys. And gay or straight, everybody was like, oh, it's like being little boys again, like, oh, let's go shoot these fight scenes.
I'm telling you, Patty, I got a real bad feeling about this. I'm not lucky like you are. All right. Fuck it.
Oh, okay, bus station bathroom is about two low-rent criminals and that run into a large problem when they try to collect a key hidden inside a bus station bathroom.
What were some of the difficulties?
Me personally, being director and producer, was my director side wanted like a dolly shot and a crane shot and a helicopter flying overhead. And my producer side's like, we don't have enough money. Just knowing my limitations was really the biggest problem.
Do you think I have a pretty face? And green? My eyes?
Yes.
Okay, it's about a writer who is starting to have some success. He writes this book, and he goes to have a book reading at this bookstore. Who's actually, the owner of the bookstore is actually in his story, so he's going to be reading the story that she's actually in. So it's going to be weird for both of them. He's reading it, she's watching it. He's retelling the story of how they met when they were teenagers growing up in Seattle during the Seattle music explosion.
How did you come up with the concept for your film?
It's not only about like trying to remember what things felt like when they were new as far as relationships and things like that, but also what it felt like for the first time to hear a band that you love when you're like 17 years old.
What was your experience like directing these actors?
It was nice because they didn't know each other. We didn't rehearse or anything like that. They didn't know each other, and they were supposed to just be meeting in the film. So that kind of worked out that way. And I did kind of have a crush on each other, so that helped too.
Kind of cute.
Yeah, I could just see it happening, so I was just like, I'll just let this go.
I can't do it.
You know what you have to do? You have to let her smell your feet.
That's silly.
It worked for me.
Really?
I'd Smell My Feet is a story about a young boy in a park with his grandfather, and his grandfather tells him the story of how he proposed, and the young boy finds inspiration to go shove a sock in a girl's face and win her over.
How did you come up with the concept?
I was just thinking about childhood moments that really stuck with me, and one of them was like my father driving me to school and asking me like what girls I had crushes on and all this stuff, and he'd give me tips on like how to get the attention of girls, like, you know, compliment their dress, McGee. Everything, you know, then you got their attention, and then you're on the good side. And then, I don't know, so it was just kind of like those innocent moments just were really, I don't know, touching.
What inspires you as a filmmaker?
I want to make films because I spent my whole childhood going to movies, and it's like the best feeling in the world to like be moved by a visual piece. It's just like, I don't know, it's just, I also like making people feel good and making people laugh and making people cry. If you make someone cry, that's the best.
Who are you?
Go ahead.
Sure. My film is The Collector, starring the late Brad Renfro. And it's basically a story about a man who's come to the end of his ropes. He's put up against a wall and given the opportunity to make a choice to carry on with his life or move on to the next chapter of his life with the help of a therapist that comes to visit him.
What was it like working with Brad Renfro?
Working with Brad was fantastic. I mean, Brad has such his own personal story, his own personal history. So he was able to bring a lot of that to the table. But the thing that was really important was our rehearsals, because he allowed for me to learn about his personal life. I mean, things that the public really didn't know. He shared those with me, and we used those to fuel the character and what he was going through at every moment.
How has the film been received since Brad's death?
Well, that's a tricky one because Brad Renfro fans love Brad Renfro, and he can do no wrong to them. But the irony of that is I made a film starring Brad Renfro, who had a tumultuous life, and my character almost mimics and mirrors Brad's journey, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, it mirrors it almost to the very end, you know, with the way that Brad died and the choice the character makes.
Hey, it's me. It's essentially about a tenuous phone conversation between two lovers who are at the end of their relationship. But the conversation actually takes place between several different lovers all around the world at the very same time.
Were there multiple locations that you shot at?
There's really only two areas we shot. One obviously was in Portugal, in Cascais, and all the other shots were actually done in New York City.
And there he was. He just floated in, light as a feather.
Secret Identity is about a young woman who's about to get married, who goes to visit her grandmother to ask her blessing and to use her wedding ring. Throughout their discussion, she discovers that her grandmother actually had a sort of romantic tryst with a superhero.
How did you come up with the concept?
Essentially, I like a lot of superhero movies that are coming out these days because it's a very popular kind of tentpole genre, and it really props up a lot of the major industry. And but there's a certain amount of cynicism kind of in that, and the movies are becoming kind of more realistic and kind of getting away from what one of the things I liked most about comics when I was a kid was kind of like the magic of it all. And so I wanted to make a film that kind of swung the pendulum in the other direction.
How were you able to get the two stars, Lee Merriweather and Charles Howerton, involved in your film?
I worked with Charles before on a film I did called Granddaddy Buck that I was the editor on. So I got to know him a bit through that, and I always kind of thought he was just great. Lee Merriweather was a clear choice by virtue of the fact that she had played Catwoman in the original Batman and with just a tremendously diverse actress. And it turns out she really liked the script and was just a doll to work with.
What is your ex-boyfriend doing here?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
I mean, I don't know. You're the one who brought us here.
Was he the one who called a second ago?
I don't know. You're writing the story.
This isn't a game.
Really? So what about this girl behind me who keeps staring at you?
So Colors Under a Cloud starts as a pretty ordinary situation, probably one of the most ordinary film situation. It's just a man and a woman in a coffee shop in New York. And turns out as the movie goes on, we realize that it's not so ordinary what's happening, and a couple of surreal things start to happen.
Why did you choose to make it English instead of French?
I chose English because for two reasons. The first one is that I wanted to try personally to write in English because the rhythm of English is very different from the rhythm of the French language. Basically, to say the same thing, you need 5 words in English and 10 in French. So for a back and forth in the dialogue, the rhythm was more interesting, and I wanted to try that. And the second reason is that I feel like the subject of this movie, the topic, is universal, and so I wanted to reach out to the biggest audience possible, and English is obviously the way to do that.
What inspires you?
I think I make movies to explore paths of life that maybe we haven't found yet. And the world is changing so much right now that I think I have a message of hope, of optimism that I want to send out. And I think that's, yeah, every day I see and hear things and I want to talk about them and comment them and maybe show an aspect of things that we haven't seen yet.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
It was my pleasure.